Can y'all pardon me just for a minute? Now I can talk. Matthew chapter 15. Then came to Jesus, scribes and Pharisees, which were of Jerusalem, saying, now, anytime you see that sentence, there came to Jesus, scribes and Pharisees, all right, you know there's a trap being set, okay? Just go ahead and assume that. Why did the disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? By the way, is there anything wrong with transgressing the tradition of the elders? If that's all it is, just a tradition, all right? And so, for they wash not their hands when they eat bread. He answered and said unto them, well, why do you transgress the commandment of God? You see the difference? You can transgress the tradition of the elders and be okay, but now we got a different deal. He said, well, why do you transgress the commandment of God? For God commanded, saying, honor thy father and mother. He that curseth father and mother, let him die the death. But you say, whosoever shall say to his father or mother, it is a gift by whatsoever thou mightest be profited by me. Now in Mark chapter 7, there's this same narrative, and Mark 7 uses the word Corban. And these guys say, no, that money is Corban. And Corban means a gift. And here's what these guys would do. You've got a retired mom and dad, all right? And they all lived in the same house. They didn't build houses across town. They lived in the same structure. And it was required, because there was no Social Security or anything like that. Your parents took care of you, and now you take care of your parents. And so that was required. You were supposed to take care of their living expenses and their food and their whatever. But if you had money, let's say there was an account set aside for this purpose, and you didn't want to spend your money on your parents, you could just say, oh, no, that account is Corban. That is a gift, and that's God's money. And I can't use God's money for such carnal purposes. And then they would spend the money any way they wanted to spend it. That's what he's talking about here. You guys say, it is a gift by whatsoever thou mightest be profited by me, and honor not his father or his mother, he shall be free. You say, as long as you say that's a Corban account, that's God's money, I can't spend that on my mom and dad, you think you're off the hook from taking care of your mom and dad. Thus have you made the commandment of God none effect by your tradition, you hypocrites. Well did Esaias prophesy of you, saying, this people draweth nigh unto me with their mouth, and honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. So we've got some behaviors now that they look good. Behaviors look good, and everybody's on the surface looks like a real good Christian, but their heart's far from him. But in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. And he called the multitude and said unto them, hear and understand. Not that which goeth into the mouth defileth a man, but that which cometh out of the mouth, this defileth the man. Now, he's talking about the heart, all right? What you take in, and here's the general idea. People say, oh my word. Drinking a beer, for instance. Let's just take one that probably happens all the time. Drinking a beer defiles you. Biblically, is that true? No, that is not true. Then what does defile the person? It's not what goes in, it's what comes out. All right, now what comes out is from the heart. So let's say here's a person and they're I don't know, an alcoholic, for instance. Well, it's all that alcohol. They're being defiled. No, it's not the alcohol that is defiling them. Now, that's doing damage. There's no question about that. What is defiling them? It is the heart that thinks it's okay for me to do this. There's the defilement. This is just a symptom of the defilement. And so, well, I've just got to cut down on my drinking. Okay, that won't solve the problem. And we're going to look at that a little bit here tonight. But we're going to step into a study here for the next couple of weeks on resident beasts of the human heart, and take a look at some things here. But before we get into what I want to show you, Jesus said that toward the end of time as we know it, events and circumstances are going to be so stressful and brutal that men's hearts will, what? Fail them for fear. And that doesn't mean, oh, people get discouraged. The word fail means to breathe out. So we're talking about an increase in cardiovascular disease as pressures begin to express themselves in a more brutal way toward the end of time. As we understand it, life is hard on your heart. I'm not talking about your emotion. I'm talking about your actual physical heart. It's hard on you. You lose a loved one. It's hard on you, isn't it? It's you have some kind of a tragic event happen. That's hard on the heart because the heart works harder. Yes, sir. It most certainly is. And matter of fact, let me read you some stuff here. This is from the World Health Organization, cardiovascular diseases, and just a few key facts here. CVDs, or cardiovascular diseases, are the number one cause of death globally. More people die annually from CVDs than from any other cause. An estimated 17.5 million people died from CVDs in 2012, and this was 7 years ago, representing 31% of all global deaths. And of these deaths, an estimated 7.4 million were due to coronary heart disease, and 6.7 million were due to stroke. Over 3/4 of CVD deaths take place in low and middle-income countries. Out of the 16 million deaths under the age of 70 due to non-communicable diseases, 82% are in low and middle-income countries, and 37% are caused by CVDs. I've got like 4 or 5 pages of stats on heart disease. It is the number one killer of Americans and everybody else, for that matter. But often these symptoms don't show up. This is like the silent killers. Pete Maravich played college basketball, and he was coached by his father, Press Maravich. He played for LSU back in the day, and if y'all remember seeing Pete, he was skinny, had knobby knees, he was shaggy-haired, he had floppy socks, and a reporter asked him one time, "Pete, why do you wear these floppy socks? Are you just trying to be cool?" He said, "No, my calves are too skinny to hold my socks up." And he couldn't buy socks small enough, and they just flopped. Y'all ever seen him? He looked like Popeye. And but that boy set records. I'm talking about NCAA Division I basketball records that stand today. Let me read you some of his records. He averaged 44.5 points per game for a season in 1969 and 1970. That's a D1 record that still stands. He averaged 44.2 points for his career every game, 67 through 70. During his NBA career, Pete Maravich was voted one of the league's 50 greatest players. And he didn't play in the NBA a terribly long time. He was incredibly flamboyant on the court. If you saw him play, he was a magician. Dribble behind the back, between the legs, these no-look passes, between the legs and all this kind of stuff. And wherever Pistol Pete Maravich played, the gym filled up. I don't care if it was college or the NBA. People wanted to see this kid play ball because he was a magician on the court. Well, on January the 5th, 1988, Pete Maravich was playing just a simple pickup game with some guys, just some friends of his. And one of those guys was Dr. James Dobson. And Dobson was at that point the head of Focus on the Family, and Dobson was involved in this basketball game. And he was scheduled to appear on Dobson's radio show later that day, so they played basketball that morning. And at the very tender age of 40, Pete Maravich collapsed on the court in that basketball game that day and died on the court of a heart attack. And Dr. James Dobson himself applied CPR, but to no avail. Pistol Pete died. So you might not know you have a heart problem. How many times have we seen, Edna Cherry? I saw Edner down at the restaurant the other day. You could not find, you're looking for somebody that's in good shape. Edner Cherry didn't have a fat cell on his body. Edner Cherry, the boxer. And just about maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago, Edner was walking out of Anytime Fitness and collapsed. Just fell on the sidewalk. And people rushed to him, and, but he found out, he had some heart trouble. And now he's got, I think, a pacemaker or something like that they put in him, and his boxing career is over. But when I heard that, I was like, what? Edner Cherry had heart trouble? Now, let's forget that heart for a moment. There are at least a couple of hearts here that we're going to be looking at. And the other heart can also be blocked. The heart can be diseased, and the symptoms are on a much different level. Here's what we've done, and I'm glad our kids are in here. In Western culture, we have taught our children to control and monitor their behavior. Now, this is what you do, and this is how you act, and this is what you say. But often children are not taught to monitor their hearts. Or now, what defiles a person? It's what comes out, okay? And what causes that? It's a heart problem, right? So we've got this heart problem, and Jesus mentioned that. And so we have these, we teach people to behave properly. And that's good. I think we should do that. But I think what we've been guilty of is picking the fruit off the ground and saying, there, I took care of the fruit on the ground problem. We'll never have problems with fruit on the ground again. Yeah, you will. Matter of fact, you'll have that same problem next year. Well, we'll pick the fruit up then. And what we do, we go around and we edit and we adjust our behaviors to appropriate levels, and we apologize and excuse and explain away our words and our behaviors and our actions, why we were so offensive or obnoxious or rude. And it's not long before we have to do the same thing. So all I've got to do is adjust my vocabulary. No, that's not all I need to do. I need to quit acting like this and need to start acting like this. No, that's not what I need to do. If I never deal with the root of my problem, I'm going to have fruit on the ground again next year. Or the next time that person says that to me, or somebody confronts me with something that I don't appreciate. And so, young people, and all of us for that matter, yes, let's monitor our behaviors. More importantly, let's monitor the heart. Because if the heart is monitored and the heart is under the control of the Holy Spirit, guess what will not come out? These things, this fruit that, we're going to pick up off the ground, you won't have to deal with that. And so if you want to get rid of the fruit on the ground permanently, all right, deal with the tree. And the way you deal with the tree is you pull the tree up by the root, all right, get rid of the root. And so what we're going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks is spiritual heart problems. And the physical heart is a pretty good illustration of some things here. If you want to permanently deal with issues, and I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but how many of us have for decades dealt with the same category of sin? Same thing. I do the same. Constantly we're going to the Lord. I've done it again. Would you forgive me here? And should we do that, by the way? If you do wrong, should you make it right? Yes, you should. Scripture teaches that. What is the best preventive care? Dealing with symptoms? How do you want your doctor to treat you? Now, they can mitigate your symptoms by giving you a prescription, and that will calm the symptom down. But what is really the best way to treat someone medically? Deal with the problem, okay? The problem produces the symptoms, and so if you deal with the symptoms, you're not dealing with a problem. And so Jesus said, what is offensive is what comes out of the mouth, not what goes in. And so the heart's got to be dealt with. We simply can't manage the damage that our carnality does to people. That won't last permanently. You can't continue to offend people and do that on a regular basis. And forgive me again. Well, after a while, what are people going to do? They don't want to hear it anymore. And it's just like when our kids do something wrong. over and over. Mom, I'm sorry. I did. Okay. Look, I'm glad you're sorry, but don't do it again. Stop the behavior that produces your requirement to apologize. And so let me show you. There's a heart problem. You've got arteries in your hearts, and plaque on that left side, plaque will build up. And it can get hard as Japanese arithmetic in your heart. And that plaque builds up, and it's like gunk in a pipe in your plumbing. That stuff can fill, and it'll cut your water pressure down, and you don't get any water coming out very strong. And so clean out that pipe, and you got your water pressure back. And so got low blood pressure, you headaches, you got some, you can't walk out to the mailbox and come back without being out of breath. Well, there's a possible problem here. You may have a blocked artery. So here's what the doctor will do. They'll go in, they'll cut open that artery. They'll clean that plaque out. And I've seen pictures of, sometimes it's like, it doesn't come out like just marshmallow cream. Sometimes it'll come out in just a tube of hard, it's like plastic. They pull that stuff out of there, and it's just hard like concrete. And no blood can get around. Anyway, whatever it is, the doctor will get it out. He will sew that back up. Now you've got full flow of blood again. And those symptoms will go away. And I don't know how many people I've talked to through the years that, said they felt 1,000% better immediately. When they wake up from surgery, they can tell that they've had a much better flow of blood. Now, here are the 4 things we're going to look at that block our heart. I'm talking about on a spiritual level. Beast number 1 is guilt, and we're going to talk about that tonight. Guilt is when, here's the problem, I owe you. And when I owe you something, and I don't pay that, don't make that right with you, I feel what? I feel guilty. So that's what we'll look at tonight. Number 2 is anger. And that's when you owe me, at least in my mind, all right? Then number 4 is greed. I owe me. I deserve this. I've earned this, whatever. And then we'll look at jealousy. And so these are 4 of these animals that we'll look at in the human heart. And Christians operate under the false assumption that if I don't do something, it's not wrong. I can think about it all day. These people, they get on a pornographic website, for instance, and, they'll look at that trash. Well, as long as I don't do anything about it, it's not wrong. Sure it is. Sure it is. I can put something in my mind, and if I am thinking wrong, I am wrong. All right? And so the heart that is drawn to those types of things needs to be dealt with. And this is what purity does. And when I give my heart to the Lord, He expiates. Use that word this morning. It means to clean off, to wash off, so that I don't desire that kind of thing anymore. It's not that you're so disciplined, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. You don't desire it anymore. You don't desire it. Let's say I'm a vulture. What am I going to be drawn to? Roadkill, exactly. All right, now say I'm a swan. Am I going to have that same attraction? No. See, the nature is different. So when a person gets saved, you have a new nature. So now you don't desire what your old nature did. You say, well, what if I do? Then those are issues that I've got to deal with, and we're going to talk about that in our study here. So we are very good. We're kind of famous for this, as a matter of fact, training ourselves to do the right thing. We train kind of like a circus dog, We are trained by parents or whoever, ourselves, and if I do the right thing, then I'm okay. Now, question, is that totally true? As long as I do the right thing, my heart's right with God. No, that is not right. But now how, you see people doing the right thing, for instance, in church. People do the right thing, and so what do we assume? That they're right. And that's the purpose, of a lot of this. I'm going to do the right thing, but I want people to assume something about me that's not true. And I want them to assume that my heart is right, and it's really not, but I can cover that up with my behaviors. And so we know when to say the appropriate thing. I know when I was a kid growing up, I can't speak for anybody in here, won't do that. I used to cuss when I was at school. You think I cussed at home? I don't think so either. But at school, I would. When I was with my buddies, I wasn't an idiot. I knew how to adjust my behavior in certain situations. You don't say that here. Now over here, not only do you do it, it's expected. And so I knew how to do that. And so do you think that's a problem, a generalized problem among church people? What do you think goes on out there that would never go on in here? And people think, I'm all right. I'm here. I'm telling you, we have a Christianity, not biblical Christianity, but contemporary Christianity has gotten a really bad name because, and I've heard people use that as an excuse. Well, I got treated like this by this guy, and he's a member of this church, and so I'm not going to church because I don't be. And I realize people look for any kind of an excuse to not go to church. But is there some validity to that? This dichotomized behavior that we have. You know, I behave this way here and that way there. And so we train ourselves kind of like SeaWorld to modify our behaviors. Now, I cannot modify my nature, but I can modify my behavior. I can train a lion to jump through a hoop, but that he's not an acrobat. You know, he's still a lion. And so now over time, things shoot loose and your O-ring starts to leak. All right? And what I mean by that is this. You can contain your behavior for so long. Just only so long. There was one instance that I did say a cuss word in front of my mama because I got mad at her. And my O-ring leaked. Yeah, and she fixed my O-ring. But what I'm telling you is this. You can mediate your behavior so long. And then you're going to start getting shaky and you're going to leak. And some of the stuff is going to leak out. And so, for instance, have you ever seen somebody get a promotion and somebody else thought the promotion should have been theirs? And so they get jealous. They get mad because, I don't know, maybe somewhere in the past somebody won a third grade spelling award that they thought they should get, but they didn't get it then either, and that just sort of brought back that memory. And so you actually begin to resent people. Somebody gets a new car, gets a new house. I don't know what all, but people have this tendency to have these heart issues. You know, they look a little too good. I wish they didn't look that good in that new dress or in that new suit or in that new shirt. You know. Man, I wish I need to be looking that good, but I don't. And so we've got these issues, and so the fruit on the ground is not the problem. Okay, that's not the problem. The problem is I have a root of, number one, we're going to be talking about this thing of guilt. Now, are there things that we don't do or say because we think it would damage our reputation? Or our business contacts, you know, our name as a Christian or whatever. Now, the question that we're going to be dealing with is there is a beast in our heart. Number one here, this matter of guilt, and it will leave scat in your life. All right, I think we all know what scat is. And so the question that we're going to be dealing with in this study is not how's your job or how's your family or how's your marriage or how are things, but here's the question, how's your heart? How's the heart? And I'm not worried about the behaviors because behaviors can be camouflaging, okay? They can be hiding things. So we learn to modify. Somebody turn to Ezekiel 36 and read verse 26. Ezekiel 36:26. Yes, ma'am. All right, whoever gets it, read it. Okay, so what do we need? What's the issue here? A new what? New behaviors? A new vocabulary? No, a new heart. And so these issues that we're going to be dealing with, they create a debt-to-debtor imbalance in every relationship. If you owe money, for instance, to somebody, you know how this feels. Have you ever owed somebody and you couldn't pay them and you see them at Walmart? You owe them money. You know you do. And let's say they don't see you first. What do? Yeah, exactly. You know, I'm out of here. And so debt governs the relationship until one of two things happen. Number one, the debt is paid in full. Isn't it good to pay a debt? Does that feel good? You know, you owe somebody $50, and you walk in, you give them a $50 bill or a $50 check, and now you see them at Walmart. What can you do? Hey, man, how you doing? Good to see you. God bless you. The guilt is gone. You don't owe the guy anymore, all right? And so that's number one. The debt is paid, or the debt is forgiven. Say the guy comes to you and says, you know, I tell you what, God's been good to me. He's blessed us in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Let's just forget that. You don't owe me any money. Next time you see him at Walmart, hey, man, again, I just want to thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. So those are the two ways that the guilt of debt can be taken care of, is either you pay that debt or that debt is forgiven. And so here's what guilt does. Guilt says, I owe you. Now, it might not be money. We're not just talking about money here, but guilt is the result of me doing something wrong to you, saying something wrong about you, or something that I perceive as wrong, and every wrong that I commit against you is an act of thievery. It is, for instance, I steal from you. And if I steal from you, that means I owe you. Let's say here's a man, and he runs off with another man's wife. He's a thief. That's the lowest kind of thievery, as a matter of fact. But he has stolen something from both members of the families, right? From both families. He has stolen the mother of those children, the wife of that husband. He's stolen that from them. He has stolen from his wife a faithful husband. He has stolen from his children a father. He's a thief. So he has created a debt. There's a relational debt here that is going to destroy these two families. And so, you know, often this guy he doesn't think in terms, and most people don't. When we do something wrong, we don't think in terms of what we have taken. We think in terms of what we have gained. So what does this guy think he has gained? A hot new wife. You know, she doesn't nag and carry on and holler and scream. She doesn't do that. Well, not that he knows of. Yeah, exactly. All right, it hadn't happened yet. And so he thinks that he has gained something new, but in essence, he has stolen something from everybody involved here. And so this debt-to-debtor relationship has been established. This guy now owes a lot of people. That's what, if I don't know, if I stole, John, one of your guns, there's a debt now, right? Now, in my opinion and in my mind, what have I gained? A gun. If somebody that's ticked off now. So I think I have gained. It didn't cost me a dime, man. This is a classic gun or pistol. This is now mine. Well, actually, I haven't gained anything. I have stolen from John. So now, here's the situation. I owe you. But I thought I gained the gun. No, I've created a debt. I'm sure it would, up to the point that it is made right. You're exactly right. So we can be guilty of creating debt in relationships. Now what happens? Well, let's say I steal John's gun, and John knows I did it. And so every time I'm around, hey, John, let me buy you lunch. Hey, come, I'll buy you some lunch. Yo, I can't buy you lunch. I'll come pick you up. We can go in my car. Is that going to help? All right. So I can't buy this thing right. I can't do that. This man that steals another man's wife, and he's stolen from both of sets of kids. Let's say there are children involved in both families. And so this guy says, hey kids, y'all want to go? Y'all want to go to Breckenridge and we'll go skiing this winter? Now, can he buy what he has stolen from those kids? No. Now, what about his own kids? Hey, kids, I'll tell you what, I'll go co-sign, I'll get you a new car. You want a new car? No, they don't need, now they might take that, but that's not what they need. What they need is a dad who loves them, but he has stolen a father from those kids. And so this creates a corrupted view in a child of self-worth. You mean I can be purchased with a car, or I can be purchased with a trip, and I'm just telling you, after a while, this begins to create inflammation, and it could be instant inflammation and problems in relationships. And so people create IOUs in relationships all the time. They pursue careers. They leave their families to fend for themselves. This guy, all he wants to do is work. Takes every minute of overtime, and then when he's off work, he hangs out with his buddies. You're stealing from your family if you do that. Sports. I love sports as much as anybody. You know. But can I rob? Can I rob from my church? Can I steal from you? When are a lot of professional athletic events televised? On Sunday. All right? What if I did what a lot of other people do? And follow our list as well. You're exactly right. You wouldn't have a pastor. If I put that, I love to fish, I love to hunt, I love to just lay around the house, you know, when I'm through with all this other stuff. But would I be robbing you of a pastor if I did that? Most certainly would. How long would you put up with that? Not long. I would not expect you to put up with that very long. And so I would create an IOU. I owe you a pastor that preaches to you regularly and consistently. Every now and then I'm going to be gone, and that's not what we're talking about. I don't want to create a detrimental situation in my church by stealing from you my time and what you need from me as a pastor. Now, what do we owe, for instance, our spouse? What do you owe your spouse? Love, respect, taking care of them on just on a number of levels. Now, what if I don't do that? Somebody else will, more likely. So I'm creating this debt I owe you. And guilt is when I have not paid my bills, either financially or relationally, emotionally, spiritually. If I don't pay what I owe people, if I don't give them what I owe them, that creates this debt-to-debtor relationship. And so now I owe you, and I feel guilty when I'm around you. I don't feel right around you. Because I've taken something from you that you need to be the best you can be. So, there are two ways to deal with this. Way number one, pay the debt. Pay the debt. All right, now, without getting specific, has anybody in here ever been owed money that you never saw? One, two. Okay, got several. They owed you money. That might not have been much, but they owed you some money. They never paid it. And they act like it's okay. And maybe you see them downtown. You see them at Walmart. You see them at Winn-Dixie or wherever. And it's just like, really? Yeah. Well, sometimes they might not even do that. Maybe say, hey, man, how you doing? Good. It's just like, yeah, they're clueless. Yeah, I owe you $175. Hey, man, good to see you, man. And they got a basket full of stuff that, probably costs $176. And so now so things won't be right. And here's, I think, what Jesus is trying to tell me here. Don't just modify your behavior. Don't just paint the outside of the casket. What did he say about that? See, these guys they're still this rot. They're just a corpse in there. There's a corpse in there. Now you've got a beautiful casket, and John could speak to this. I'm sure you've seen some pretty grisly bodies at funeral home, but the casket's beautiful, man. And you may even have a closed casket service because what's inside is just so grisly you don't want to look at it. A lot of people are that way. And probably everybody in here, from the smallest, youngest child to the oldest person in here, you have been in contact with people who are just like that. The inside, their heart, their thoughts is just grisly. But boy, it's in a good package. And you'll see them every Sunday morning. And they'll give you the glad hand out at the restaurant. You know what I'm saying? But there's a debt that they owe. And so one thing that I have got to do, I've got to make sure that my heart is what Jesus said is pure. Because he said in Matthew chapter 5, the pure in heart will see God. All right? And that phrase just simply means that the pure in heart will see as God sees. You'll have the same vision of people. You will see people the way God sees people. And pure, we've talked about it before. What is this? Is that pure honey? That's pure honey. What does that mean? This is pure honey. Kids in the back, what does it mean? If this is pure honey, what does that mean? That's all that's in here, right? There any grape juice in here? There's probably no grape juice in here. I doubt, there's nothing in here but honey. All right, now, that's the pure heart. The pure heart is, there's nothing else in it but a desire to please God. Nothing else in there. There's no secret agenda. There's no, man, I can do this in the dark. I can get by this when nobody else is around. There's none of that. And that is possible to have that. God has given us the inventory of spiritual benefits in the Bible to have a pure heart. And I can owe God. My guilt, I can do something. I can sin against the Lord. If I sin against you, by the way, I sin against God. So I owe primarily. Now, when David committed sin, his adultery with Bathsheba, both of them should have been stoned, correct? That's what the law of Moses said. But God was merciful and didn't, because he had a greater plan for David than his death. And so he commits adultery with this woman and then finagles away to have her husband murdered. That's pretty grisly stuff here, folks. But yet Acts says he was a man after God's own heart. How do you put that together? He wasn't a man after God's own heart because he committed adultery and murder. He was a man after God's own heart because he handled his sin right. But it took a while. All right? Let's turn. Let me read you his confession. Look at Psalm 51. I'm not going to read it all, and then I might. Psalm 51 is verse 1. Psalm 51 is the confessional letter that David wrote for his sin with Bathsheba. But it was 1 year later. For 1 year, David lived with this debt. He lived with this guilt. He was a horrible husband. He was a horrible dad. He was a horrible king. Yes, sir. During that 1 year? Yes, sir. He was a miserable saved man. All right, look at verse 1. Have mercy upon me, O God. Now, by the way, if you want to read look at the heading, to the chief musician, a psalm of David when Nathan the prophet came unto him after he had gone into Bathsheba. Okay, so that's what this is about. Have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness, according unto the multitude of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from mine iniquity. Cleanse me from my sin, for I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Against thee only have I sinned, and done this evil in thy sight, that thou mightest be justified when thou speakest, and be clear when thou judgest. Behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Behold, thou desirest truth in the inward parts. Where? In the inward parts. And in the hidden part, thou shalt make me to know wisdom. And he goes on to talk in that vein. It is the heart. It is the inward part. It is the private part. Not my behaviors. My behaviors are controlled by the hidden part. Okay? And so, what do we owe people? If I've sinned against you, I'm a debtor, and I owe you. And it may be something as simple as, John, well, this wouldn't be simple. Man, you guys were gone the other day, and I slipped in the back door, and I took one of your pistols. Would you forgive me? I do. Now, are we through yet? Now, I really appreciate the pistol, but I'm really sorry I took it. Well, we're not through yet. And so knowing John, yes, he would forgive. I also need to make restitution. Here's your pistol. And so now the debt has been settled. And so there are two ways to settle these relational debts that we have. Number one, pay your debt. Could you imagine the cleansing that would take place just in the United States if hearts were made pure by the right relationship with God and people paid their relational debts? Could you imagine? Look at the marriages that could be healed. Relationships between parents and children that could be healed. Family, yes. Oh, my word, yes. I mean, it would... The Word of God is the cure, folks. It's the cure. It's not government money. It's not government programs. Because none of those things deal with what? They don't deal with the heart. They deal with behaviors. Now, you can coerce people. You know, these kids back here are, your dads are big enough, they could make you do what they want you to do. They could twist your arm behind they could make you do stuff. But that's not, the issue is you want them to want to do stuff, all right? And so why do we want to please God? Well, because he set my house on fire. Okay. He blew my car up. Okay. So that's why I'm doing the right thing, because I'm scared to death that he'll come after me. What kind of a relationship is that? Very wrong, bitter, angry, feared relationship. Now, why does a husband remain faithful to his wife? Man, I can't afford a divorce. I've had guys tell me that. I've had men tell me that right in that office. I can't afford it, man. She'd take me to the cleaners. Well, it's the kids. We got to stay together for the kids. Really? That's the depth of your relationship with your wife? Is you can't afford to get rid of her? Now, if that is the level of the relationship, eventually what's going to happen? Eventually it's going to blow up. And everybody in here knows that. And so, I have a debt to the world. All right? I owe them. I owe you the best that God has made me. I owe that to you. I owe you a pure heart. I owe that. I'm a debtor to you, that when I stand in this pulpit and preach, that I am preaching from an intimate relationship with Christ and not just words on paper. I owe that to you. Now look what we owe. Yes, sir. Good question. Did he answer it? Oh, he didn't answer that? Okay. Well, why do we? Are you afraid? Or is it because I love him? Why are we faithful? And let's go back to the marriage thing, because this is it's a major relationship in the world. Why are we faithful to our spouses? Is it because we can't afford to do anything else, or it'd create family problems, or da-da-da-da-da? Or is it because I love her, I love him? And what about the guy that would say something, well, I'm faithful most of the time? Yeah. Hadn't done that in a long time. Now, if you're faithful most of the time, you're faithful none of the time. All right? And so motive here is, Jesus was just hammering on motive here. Why, you guys, you have this money set aside, why don't you give it to your parents? Because it's Corbin. No, it's not Corbin. That's just what you've called the account. You've said, this is God's money, I'm going to give it to you ain't going to give that to the temple. You're going to buy a new chariot. You're going to buy a new horse. You're going to buy a new clothes. You know, come on, man. You owe you have a debt. And they were feeling guilty, and that's why the question. That's why they were raising these questions, because there was guilt in their lives. And so, if there's ever this debt-to-debtor relationship is ever introduced into a relationship, somebody owes the other person. There's something that needs to be paid. And there will be a problem in this relationship until one of two things happens. Number one, either the debt is paid or the debt is canceled. Now, in the case of salvation, both things happen simultaneously. It is not only paid by the Son of God, it was canceled by the Son of God. So what does he owe us? Nothing. He's already given us everything we need. Everything. And so this beast that just eats away at relationships, this guilt, everybody owes somebody something in one way or another. And so here's some homework for us this week. Find somebody you owe. Find somebody you owe. Maybe you owe them. I need to ask your forgiveness. I did this. I said this. Maybe it's, I borrowed $5 months ago, and I've just forget here. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. You kids, it may be, you need to go to a teacher and say, look, I've not given my best. I've talked about you. I've criticized you. I need to ask your forgiveness. I don't know what kind of a debt, that we owe, but let's pay that debt and clear this stuff out of the arteries of our heart. Let's get this spiritual, emotional plaque taken care of so that we can be healthy. We've got a world to influence. We've got a community to influence, and so let's do that. All right. Thank you all for being here tonight. Appreciate it, and be here Wednesday night, 7:00, and we'll study Scripture. And let's see. Also, there was something else. No, we talked about the Legos for Brett. Okay, I guess that's everything. All right. Let's be dismissed. Thank you for being here tonight. God bless you. Be careful going home, and have a great week. Lord, thank you so much for your word. And, Lord, I'm glad that you paid our debt. I am so thankful for that. And you paid it permanently. You paid it eternally. And now, Lord, I ask you to give us this kind of a heart. We want a pure heart. We want a heart that beats in rhythm and harmony with the very heartbeat of the Son of God. We don't be holier than thou. We want to be pure. We want to be right with you. And when we're right with you, we're right with everyone else. And Father, we don't want to just modify our behaviors. We want our heart clean. And whatever we have to do to get to that point, I pray that we would do that. Thank you for those that are here tonight. Bless us this week in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, see you Wednesday night, 7 o'clock.